Hello. How are you? How are you today? I'm feeling a lot better actually. I've got today off, so whoop whoop. um, so I'm gonna do a video today about why I think therapy is important and what I wish I knew before I started therapy. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking down on my notes because I don't want to spend the whole video saying blah, so that's why I've got some notes. So yeah, so if I look down, that's why. So you know how it is here. Welcome to the channel. Relax yourself, get something to eat while we do the video. It might take some time. Get something to drink. Get yourself ready. Relax. It's a safe space. So let's have a discussion, right? Let's have a discussion. So why am I making this video? I'm making this video first because I believe in therapy. I believe in counseling. And if there's anyone out there right now making this decision whether to start counseling or not, I hope that you'll find this video and I hope that it will be useful to you some way. If it's not useful to you, you can send it to someone who you think might benefit from this video. So please like, share and comment below. What did I wish I knew before I started therapy? So the first thing is I wish I knew that therapy is for everyone. It's so easy to say that. But sometimes forget that everyone can benefit from therapy. Sometimes we feel as though therapy is for people that are crazy, people that are weak-minded, people that are experiencing severe trauma. That's who therapy is for. But I'm here to tell you that therapy is helpful to anyone. So, and also another hindrance to therapy as well, especially people from immigrant backgrounds. Sorry if I offended anyone there, but what I'm trying to say is that sometimes in minority groups, we kind of look at therapy as a white thing. For example, in African backgrounds, most of the times they're like, well, what do you need therapy for? Like, what's going on in your life? You're not working, you're a child, you don't need therapy. Like, are you going crazy? Why do you think you need therapy? So it's stigmatized in the Asian, African, Caribbean societies and also in religious societies and communities. Because most of the times when you talk about therapy, it's as if there is a doubt in your belief. Because obviously in religion we believe that go to God if we have difficulties. Therapy does not replace God, right? It doesn't replace religion. It's just another form. You don't have to go through deep traumas for you to benefit from therapy. The second thing I wish I knew before starting therapy is how important it is to do your research. When you go to therapy, you're basically exposing yourself. You're becoming vulnerable. You're mentally exposing yourself. It's like you're becoming naked, right? For some people, for the first time ever. So it's good to make sure that this person that you're becoming emotionally naked to is actually someone that's qualified. Otherwise, it's just going to cause more damage, right? So the first thing I would say is check out the organization. So if the therapist is employed, you can check out who they're employed by and make sure they're a reputable organization. And also make sure the therapists themselves have certificates. Obviously, make sure they're qualified. Intervention you feel as though you would need, because the more traumatized the event you've gone through is, the more qualified you would need your therapist to be. Make sure that the therapist is qualified in terms of academic education, and make sure that they're part of any governing bodies. In the UK, there are psychological governing bodies, and make sure that they have experience. And also, it's good to know how many years of experience they have and in what kind of areas. Then you can match their experience and the area to the need that you have. Right? So go by what you feel is comfortable with you. For me personally, when I look at a therapist, I want to make sure that they went to university, at least they have like a degree level, and then make sure that they're certified with therapy community and make sure they're accredited and they're actually licensed therapists, right? Because you don't want to just open your scars with someone who is not qualified to support you with them. And also another thing as well, whilst you're doing the research on a therapist, It's also to look at the approaches that they use. Different therapists uses different approaches. Some therapists use CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Some therapists are more talking therapists, and they're more person centered. So that's mostly like they're listening to you. It's more you doing the talking. And some therapists are more trauma centered or informed. Some therapists do hypnosis as well. So basically, look at what you feel will be beneficial for your therapy and make sure that the therapist or counselor you're going to has experience in those areas, right? So if you've experienced trauma in the past, it will be helpful to go to a therapist that's trauma informed. I think for trauma, they have different training that they go through to handle trauma, especially complex trauma. So what complex trauma is, multiple of trauma, right? Obviously, trauma ranges from low level trauma to obviously severe trauma, for example, sexual abuse. And multiple sexual abuses would be a complex trauma. It would be good to make sure the therapist you're going to has experience in those areas if that's something you've experienced, just so that you can get the best support from your therapist. And also another thing I wanted to say as well, it might sound a little bit controversial, but it's okay to have preference in regards to who you want your therapist to be. You can have a preference in terms of gender. Are you comfortable with having a female therapist? If you're a male, are you comfortable having a male therapist? Then you can go to that. I feel like with therapy, it has to be personalized, or it's better for it to be personalized, because again, you're going to be vulnerable. You want to feel as though you're being heard. You want to feel as though this person is actually someone that can relate to you. So this is the one place that you can be selfish, right? This is the one place that you can be sexiest, you can be, whatever. This is the one place you can do that. So as a female, I might feel more comfortable speaking to a female therapist, and there's nothing wrong with that. So your therapist has to be personalized to support your comfort level, so that you can feel able to be vulnerable with your therapist and build trust. You can choose on the race, the therapist. For example, if you're a black person, you might feel more comfortable going to a black therapist. The benefit is that there's so much options out there in terms of therapy. You can do online therapy. You can choose the gender you want. You can choose the race you want as a therapist. There's so many ways that you can personalize it to your preference and taste. And it's not racist. It's not racist, for example, for a white person to be like, you know what, I would like to have a white therapist. There's nothing wrong with that. For example, what struggles that a black female goes through, I mean, it will be difficult for, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it will be difficult for another race to kind of understand, or they can relate to it based on other experiences, but not based on personal experiences, if you get what I'm trying to say. So some people might choose to go for a therapist that's the same race as them. That's not racist at all. That's absolutely fine. And also someone might choose to go for a therapist that has a religious background, just so that they can understand the spiritual aspects, if that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with that as well. I think that's really good, actually, that we can personalize therapy in such a way that it can be accessible to everyone. Why I said that is really helpful, because actually I had a therapist and I felt as though she could not understand me at all. It wasn't because of a racial divide or differences. It's not that. She was black. There was difference in understanding. She could not at all relate or understand what I was trying to say. And also, she saw me being vulnerable and my experiences as entertainment for her. Maybe it's just my interpretation of her behavior and action, but she just seemed very shocked. It's like, hello, I'm the one that's here for therapy. Like, I'm not here to entertain you, okay? She just seemed very intrigued and entertained, tell me more. Like, it's so weird for to you, it might seem like, well, that's normal, that's what therapists need to do, but I've gone through different counselors and I can tell the difference. She just seemed as if she has not had any kind of experiences. So she was just very shocked with everything I was saying, and I'm sorry, you don't need that, So basically, the point I'm making is that sometimes the therapist might be the same race as you, but it doesn't their experience with what you're saying, or they can relate to anything you're saying. Everything sounds shocking, right? So that's the point I'm making. So the third thing I wish I knew before starting therapy is to record your feelings and emotions. Recording your feelings and emotion could be in different forms. So you could journal how you feel, your emotions, you can journal them. You can do video recording like I'm doing now. You can do audio recording as well. My preferred method is journaling. Actually, that's my favorite method because it helps you to declutter your mind and it helps you to process information, right? I feel as though that's why in school it was mostly writing, right? You weren't allowed to use computers, just because when you write, you're thinking, and then you're thinking first about what you want to write, and then how to formulate that, and then how to translate that into a piece of paper, right? So there's a lot more thoughts that goes into writing, right? That's why I prefer journaling. It doesn't, again, when you're journaling, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have perfect punctuations, perfect spellings. It's just getting it out, right? It's like getting it. Sometimes when you write something, it's like, oh, you feel so light. You've taken it out, you've written it in the paper, you can read it. And the good thing about journaling as well, you can go back in that exact time and space and see exactly how you were feeling and what words you chose, right? Because the vocabulary is big. The words you've chosen to write down can actually be an indication as well on how you were feeling, why you use that specific word rather than another word. Writing is, personally, I find that is very important. And also, the writing is for you, so you can use shorthand code as well. It doesn't have to be perfect as if someone else is going to read it, right? It's for you. You write it in a way that you can understand, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be innocent. Literally the darkest thoughts, you can write them down. If you don't feel comfortable that if you don't feel comfortable that it might be safe, you can rip it out, you bean it, you can tear it up, you can do whatever. But it's just good to write stuff down, and it just helps you to articulate a lot better as well, and it helps you to understand your feelings as well. And when you go back through your journal, you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I wrote that, right? That's one thing. It's like, oh my god, like, who was she? Can I go back and give her a hug? So you can sympathize a little bit more as well when you read it. It's a beautiful thing, and also it shows you how far you come. And another thing as well about journaling is that it shows you patterns. One thing as well I find useful when journaling is to kind of add in background information, so you can write where you're writing. You can write down the time. You can write down this room you're in, just so it's more personalized, right? So that when you go back to read it, you can actually feel it, and it can bring you back to that moment. And then video recording, right? Video recording is good as well. I've done video recording before. But the thing about recordings, you have to keep forwarding to the point that you actually want to see or relate to. The good thing about video recording, you can physically see the state you were in. You can see the physical state you were in when you did that recording, right? So that's good. You can look back, you can see the tears if you're crying, you can feel the emotions, because a video can show everything, facial expressions, body movement, body language, everything. So it's more in depth. But negative thing is that sometimes when you look at it, you feel pathetic, or even when you're holding the camera, recording yourself crying, it's like, so that's the thing. But if you can get past that, then video recording is also very good. And also video recording can show you immediate reactions, right, without all that filter in terms of journaling. Because when you're journaling, you're filtering a little bit, you're thinking about it more. But speaking is mostly like you're just saying how you're feeling exactly, quoting anything, right? So the other form, again, that I've said is audio recording, so you can record your voice. That's quicker as well. That's quicker. You don't get to see your face if you don't want to feel like you're pathetic, right? So again, you can take in a lot more information in terms of tone of voice, how you're feeling, and all of that. Again, you can see, you can hear in a video, right? And it's an immediate release of stress as well. It's like venting to a friend, right? When you just have a recording, you just vent. It's like, oh, you've saved money as well from going to just cancelling, right? Audio recording is one thing as well. That's quicker. You don't have to be carrying your journal everywhere. So gauge and see whichever is best for you. You can go for that option. Recording feelings help you to have an idea of what to discuss in a therapy. Before I wish I knew this. To be honest, I did do this anyway because I saw videos about journaling. I'm not saying you have to journal before or record your emotions before you go to therapy, but it's very important if you did before you started therapy, just because it kind of helps you to think about what you want to talk about once you go into therapy. And also you start to see that there are areas in your life that are actually causing difficulties, but it's like you have to know first before you seek help, right? If you don't have illness, you would not go to the doctor. So by recording your emotions, that's where you see patterns. That's where you kind of remember that this is how I felt, right? Because if you have a bad day, you don't record it, you forget about it, right? It's like you don't remember what you've done sometimes until you look back in a picture, you know, of something you did 10 years ago, for example, and then you're like, oh my God, I actually remember this picture brought me back to that. So that's what recording your emotions is, and that's what writing a journal is. It reminds you of that emotional state so that you don't forget. You can also see patterns when you go through your journals. You can like, I've written about this so many times, relationships, for example, so many times. Sadness, I've talked about how sad I am so many times. You can see the pattern, right? So you can kind of gauge to what you need to talk to your therapist about once you go there, so you have an idea. One thing I would say as well is to look at the emotion wheel. So it's a wheel that kind of helps you identify your emotions. It has like 7 emotional states, so bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, sad, happy, and surprised. And then within each one of those, it divides and talks about more emotions that comes from each one of the 7. So it just helps you pinpoint exactly or close to exactly how you're feeling. It just helps you articulate your feelings more. So it's not angry, you know. There's underlying emotions that comes with anger, right? So it's helping you to pinpoint. And also, like I said, you know, writing down your thoughts, emotions, feelings help you articulate to other people how you're feeling, to yourself as well. Because sometimes it's like you're upset, but you don't know, you're having a bad mood, but you would be sitting there thinking and thinking, and you don't actually know why you're angry, you don't know why you're sad, just because you're not used to this. Everything is a practice, right? So when you practice to identify your feelings and emotions, it becomes easier over time. Trust me, like I know, I did not know how I used to feel at all. I would just be so angry for no reason. Or it's good to know how you feel. Number 4, the fourth thing I wish I knew before going to therapy is that therapists are not magicians. They're not mind readers, they're not fixers, right? They're therapists. They're just you or me. They're not gonna fix your life in a 60 minutes session or in even 10 different sessions, right? It's a process. Yeah, you don't go into it thinking, oh yeah, I'm broken and someone's gonna fix me, right? It's not that. You're not broken. Maybe you've gone through certain things that has designed you to the person you are right now, but you're not broken. You're improving, but you don't need fixing, because God already made you perfect, right? You just need to fix certain things. It's like when you get a phone, right? And the camera isn't working. It doesn't mean that the phone is not working, for example, or the camera is blurry, right? Or maybe the lens is dirty. It doesn't mean the phone itself is broken. It just means that you need to clean the lens so that you can take in light and take a better picture. So that's how you need to see this. Like you're cleansing the lens, you're cleaning the lens so that the camera can see clearly, but the phone itself is fully designed. It's therapists, they're not there to tell you how to feel. You need to go into therapy kind of having an idea of what you need to work on, right? They don't tell you what to feel, they don't tell you what to think, and they can't tell you what happened to you. Only you know what happened to you. In some cases, even you don't know what happened to you, right? It takes tracing certain experiences and events for you to actually come to terms and know what actually happened to you. So don't expect therapists to know everything about you, to just understand you straight away. No, you need to give them some information for them to work through, right? So the information you give them, that's what they use to make inferences based on what you've told them. So again, this is why it's good to record your emotions and be able to identify your feelings, right? This is why it's so important, because then you can go back to your therapist and be like, you know, this is how I've been feeling for the past 2 months based on your journaling or your video recording, right? Than going into therapy fresh. I mean, I'm not saying this if you haven't done any kind of journaling or video recording, it's fine. You can still go to therapy. It's not end all or be all. I'm just saying you get the most out of therapy if you do this beforehand. Again, therapy is expensive. Not everyone can afford it. So if you're going there, you know, go there prepared. And also it's important to be honest. This person is there to do their job. You know, you are their job. So it's good to be honest. Don't say things for you to gain favors. Don't say things for you to be the nice guy, the good guy, you know, the innocent person. Like, just say things as they are. You know, it doesn't matter if you're the villain in the story, just that's how they can tell what's going on with you, and that's how they can spot patterns. If you go there and just tell them what you think they want to hear and say things that are not truthful, then they're going to give you the wrong diagnosis. That I don't think if diagnosis is the right word, but again, remember, they don't know you. You know, they know you based on the information you give them, but if the information you're giving them is not true, then they have the wrong information about you. So the inferences they're going to make might be what you want to hear, but it might be wrong. You know, like I said, they're not magicians. They go by what you tell them. So, you know, make sure you're truthful in those therapy sessions. You know, they're legally obliged to not disclose information unless someone else is at risk. If someone is not in the immediate risk, you can tell them whatever, and they have to not tell anyone. And also, they shouldn't really be judging you. So if you get a therapist that's judgmental, then maybe you can consider getting another therapist, because if you're thinking a certain way and they're being judgmental, then they're not the right therapist for you anyway. So in any case, you need to find someone else. So that's the point I'm making. Definitely be honest with your therapist. It's not about who is wrong or right? It's about you giving them the information that's beneficial for them to help you. And the 5th thing I wish I knew before going to therapy is that don't do all the talking. This might sound contradictory, but bear with me for a second actually. But yeah, don't do all the talking. Go all 10 sessions you doing the talking. You know, it's nice to, you know, go to someone and just they will listen to you. You can let go everything. You know, they're just there to listen, nod. You know, we all have friends that we try to have a conversation and they're telling us about themselves, or they're telling us about what happened to them the day before, or, you know, they don't listen. So when you get someone that's willing to listen to you, it feels good. So, you know, it might be difficult for you to stop. Don't do all the talking. At the end of the day, it's 2 people having that conversation, right? You don't want to go into therapy and then develop a trait, not a narcissist, but a narcissistical traits, right? Just all about yourself, talking all about you. Yeah, therapy is about you, but it's also about the therapist having an interchange. You're having a discussion, but you're doing most of the talking, right? A good therapist would have a structured therapy anyway, where maybe 3 sessions would be just you talking, and they won't stop you at all. You just talk, so they have an idea of who you are and what you've gone through and the experiences you've had, etc., etc., right? And then they have formulation sessions where they put into what you've told them into kind of a category to help you manage and move on from whatever you've gone through, right? And then there's a session that you review therapy and see if it has met the goals that you expected, right? So a good therapist would have a structured therapy. So let's say you paid for 10 sessions, it will be a structured one. So it will be divided into different sessions, right? But the point I'm making is don't do all the talking, right? At the end of the day, the therapist is supposed to also give you tools that you need to move past things. I feel like this is the problem actually that people face when they say therapy doesn't help and they've been doing therapy for like 30 years. I'm not saying that therapy is a one-day fix-all, but what I'm trying to say is that therapy shouldn't be the same from when you begin to doing it the same frequency for 20 years, unless you went through a really, really, really deep trauma. But otherwise, you shouldn't need therapy 20 years later as much as you needed it in the beginning. So what happened is they just go, they talk, and then they meet another therapist, they talk again. It's like all they're doing is talking and just reliving the same trauma, but they're not actually moving past the trauma and dealing with it and, you know, healing from it. So that's why it becomes a cycle of just counseling and therapy over and over again, and you just don't feel like it's doing anything, it's helping you. So what I would say is lean back a little bit and maybe talk less, because the therapist, you're not going to be talking and the therapist like, oh, shut up, you've talked too much. They're there to listen to you, but you need to gauge and be like, you know what, okay, let me allow the therapist to say something, and also be open to actually taking what they say, because sometimes we will just be nodding so that they can finish what they're saying, so that you can jump in and continue the conversation again. Yeah, so do less talking. Especially once they've known most of the major things that happen to you, allow them to give their input. And the other thing is, refrain from talking about all the minor things that has happened throughout the week. Therapy sometimes it's once a week, and obviously so much would have happened in that week before you see your therapist, and you cannot wait to just tell them everything about it. So what I'm saying is that they don't need to know every minor details that have happened throughout the week. They don't need to know that someone shouted at you in traffic. They don't, unless it's absolutely relevant. If not, reserve your 60 minutes for something more meaningful, right? That's caused you to be the person you are. I would say that's more important, right? Like I said, you only have 1 hour. They don't have time to be listening to. I mean, they have time because they're being paid for it. But it's not beneficial for you to spend that 1 hour talking about what has happened in that week. Talk about the core thing. Talk about the things that brought you to therapy in the first place. Sometimes it could be like a masking mechanism so that you don't become vulnerable, so you're talking about other little things. If it's a good therapist, they will bring that back. Focus the major things that brought you to focus. Be mindful of how much you derail in your therapy conversation. And also, don't be a control freak, right? Let them do their job. At the end of the day, you went there because you needed help. So you don't go into therapy thinking you know everything, you know what needs to be solved. Some people will be like, oh yeah, the therapist told me what I know. Yeah, they're not going to tell you anything majorly different, but they're going to connect the dots. They're going to make you see patterns. They're going to make you be more aware. They're going to some most parts, say what you already know, but help you actually acknowledge it and process it. That's the thing as well that I struggled as well. It's like, they're telling me what I know, but it's different knowing and feeling, right? That's what therapy is supposed to get you, is the feeling. Because now you know, as an adult, now you know, right? But most of this traumas probably happened when you were a child, and then you did not know. So you can kind of rationalize and understand what happened, but the therapist would help you actually feel that, like feel it in your core, feel it in your heart, and relate to it, right? That's what therapy is. They're not supposed to tell you something completely different. They're telling you what you maybe already know in your subconscious. You're not just there to talk, like I said, you're there to also listen, because especially if the therapist is a CBT trained therapist, they will give you tools on how to manage whatever that is. So for example, let's say you have trouble with anger, you have anger issues, they will give you coping skills. For example, count to 10 when you're angry, think about certain things when you're angry. So they're giving you skills and tools to use when certain triggers appear. So if you just go, you're talking and you're not taking in that tools that they're giving you, you're still going to get triggered and you wouldn't be able to deal with it, right? So that's what therapy is about as well. It's also about listening. So you want to learn the skills so that you can move past whatever is holding you back. And also one thing I'll say as well is to take practical steps. So if your therapy recommend that you do certain things throughout that week, so let's say your therapist says you should challenge yourself and tell someone something that you've been wanting to tell them, but you're just afraid, or you're not confrontational, trying to help you come out and actually confront something, you need to take that because that's part of the practice, right? So yeah, and also take notes. I take notes. This is my notes. Yes. So take note for your therapy, in your therapy session. Obviously, you're not going to have so long in this session to take notes, but you can do just brief notes. You can write brief notes and then you can rewrite it afterwards, or you can put bullet points, or just even just a word. They might tell you to read something, write the name of the book, or to listen to something, write the name. Like, just take notes. So again, when you come back to next session, you know what happened in the last session. If you can anyway take notes, it's really good. And the sixth thing I wish I knew before I started therapy is to space out therapy. So spacing out your sessions. Like I said earlier, when you have someone that's just going to listen to you, non-judgmental, someone that they can allow you to just talk, that's something we don't have access to now. People, you wouldn't have someone that will listen to you for 1 hour straight without them interrupting you, right? You might want to do more sessions. You're like, oh, anything that happened, you want a session. But I would say go for 1 to 2 sessions a week. Maximum, I would say 2 sessions, because you don't want to have so many sessions throughout the week. You don't want to become addicted to just talking. It's kind of counterproductive, right, when you have so many sessions, because you have not given yourself enough time to process the information from previous sessions. And also, counseling, it takes emotional, mental and physical toll on your body as well. It takes so much, especially when you're talking about trauma, right? It takes so much from you mentally and emotionally. So it's good to give yourself space to kind of process that information before moving on to another topic as well. Again, counseling might cause you to kind of relieve trauma, and which might mean that you might have to go through the 5 stages of grief all over again, even though this maybe it might be a lot shorter this time. So the 5 stages of grief is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right? So that's why I would say space it out, because you don't know how much each stage might take. So I would say once a week, just so it gives you space to go through the different stages, right? Where we want to arrive at is acceptance. We want to be able to acknowledge what has happened, right? Because for the most part, sometimes you're in denial, especially if it's a trauma that involves your parent, right? Some of us don't want to think that our parents neglected us, for example, right? So it might be heavy to accept that, what, that actually happened. Might be very angry, like they brought me into this world, so why would they neglect me? Like it might be confusing, right? And then you get to the bargaining where you're like, oh my, like this shouldn't have happened to me, stuff like that. And then you're very sad about it, right? And then you get to acceptance, and like I said, that's where we want to get at, where we're like, you know what, this has happened, but I can't change it. I understand it happened, and you accept it, and you forgive if you need to, and you kind of move on. You know that that's part of your history, and sometimes that would take some time. That would probably take longer than a week for you to reach to acceptance, but at least you've given yourself at least a week to process that information, right? Before diving more into that. Again, a good therapist will gauge how much to dive into certain traumas. If they can see that you are not coping well, they will talk about something lighter in upcoming sessions, and then address that trauma again once you've kind of are less disturbed by it, if that makes sense. The good thing about giving yourself time to process this is that if you're still struggling with any of those stages, you can come back to a therapist on the next session, and you can address that and see how best it can help you move past and come to acceptance of what has happened. And also, like I said, do your homework, right? When you go to therapy, it's not about just talking, and it's about you listening, and it's about you practicing whatever skills they give you, right? So do your homework. If they ask you to challenge yourself in real life, try and do it because even if you fail, like just still try, and then you can go and tell them that you didn't do it right, etc. And then maybe there's a reason why you're still struggling in that area. So it's just good. So try and do it. Read the books if they recommend books. Just do it. Okay, that's what therapy is about. It's everything. So just do it. And also one thing as well is take a break if you feel like you need to. Like I said, therapy can be very, very intense. Again, remember these are things that has happened sometimes quite a long time ago, right? And then you're bringing this back. So it's very intense. So if you feel as though you need more time, want to skip some weeks, you want to just take a break, you can talk to your therapist, right? They're very understanding. As long as you inform them in advance, they're very understanding. It's normal. Like I personally haven't had complaints or anything from my counselor or therapist when I'm like, I need a break. They're very understanding about it. So please, like, take a break. Therapy is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a slow process. So if you feel like you need a space, however long of a space you need, just let them know, and they'll give you that space, and then you can come back to therapy once you feel like you're ready. So number 7, what I wish I knew before I started therapy is that it's so important to know your goals before therapy. Know what you want to achieve in therapy, right? Set your goals, what you would like therapy to be like. Obviously, it doesn't have to be perfect, but what are the key issues you want to deal with? If you're not sure, I would recommend you look at the pyramid of mastery. So what that is, it's like a pyramid shape, and then it gives you different areas in your life, and basically the idea is that if you try to balance out all these important areas in your life, it would lead to happiness and fulfillment. So in this list, the main ones I would say is emotional and meaning. Again, how you feel is very, very important, because how we feel relates to how we think and our thought processes, right? That's what's coming out, so how we feel. And our emotions lead to our actions, right? So it's very important to know our emotions and also their meaning. So that's one thing that could be on your list. And also relationships are very important. That could be part of your list as well. Relationship could involve friendships. They could involve romantic relationships. Anything that it's relating to other people could fall into that category, right? So that could be one thing you might put on your list of something you want to talk to your therapist about. And also your career, right? Sometimes we choose a certain career goal, especially in the UK where I am. You're supposed to decide your career from the age of 16, right? And very, very crazy, and that's a whole nother topic. But at the age of 16, like, what do we know? We don't really know much, right? For us to choose a career that we're supposed to do for the rest of our lives. Sometimes we're doing a career that it's not actually us, it's not actually what we want to do. And also, we did it based on experiences in the past that led us to that, but that's not actually what's fulfilling to us. So, like, just revisiting that. And then another area is spirituality, your relationship with God, or, you know, finding meaning in life in general. That could be an area as well that you want to talk about. You can trick it to what you feel is more important to you. Again, if you've experienced complex trauma, maybe you could write those, specify a little bit more. You could be like, maybe I want to talk about my childhood, maybe I want to talk about what happened to me from age 12 and 16. Make it to how it suits you. At the end of the day, it's about you. Therapy is about you. So design it in a way that you would get the maximum benefit from therapy. And also the counselor will come back to those goals as well. Towards the end, when they're doing your review, they can come back to those goals and they can help you link to your behavior and the goals you've set. What end results do you want to achieve by the end of therapy? So that's something as well. Some therapists will ask you, they'll be like, what do you want out of therapy? What do you want to achieve by the end of therapy? For example, you could talk about how you might want to identify your emotions, or you might want to be more self-aware, or you might want to stop repeated behavior. It's good as well because you can kind of get if therapy is working. When it's what you want to achieve, you feel as though you're achieving them. Kind of see that, okay, therapy is working, you're not just wasting your money and your time. This is actually it's good to set a goal as well, so that it helps you and it also helps the therapist to make sure that the method that they're using is helping you, and also for you to feel as though therapy is actually being beneficial and you're not just wasting your time. And the other thing as well is that therapy is actually an ongoing process. Psychology says that, so we as adults, our behavior is based on our early experiences, so based on our childhood experiences from the age of 0 to, I think, 5, 6 or 7, I can't remember, don't quote me on that. Basically, as adults, we're working on the programming we've received from childhood. It's going to take some time to relearn everything you learned as a child, right, when you couldn't even process and understand. It's going to take some time for you to install new programming, so please bear with yourself. It's a life journey. It's not something you just do and now you're perfect. Like I said, it's not you going to get fixed, right? It's you understanding yourself. It's like raising a child, right? You take your time. You don't just push them to be 18 quick and force the process. Whatever age you're at when you go to therapy, just know you're dealing with something that happened from when you were early child, right? And so let's say you're 30 and something happened to you at the age of 7. How many years has gone past that you're now revisiting that, right? So just remember that you've behaved in that programming for such a long time. Form a habit after 30 days or 60 days. So imagine if you behaved a certain way for 20 years, how difficult it is for you to change. So just be patient with yourself and understand that it's a slow process, but it's very, 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 very beneficial at the end. And number 8, if I can count correctly. Number 8 is be kind and patient with yourself. I'm not saying trauma cannot happen in later in life. So trauma is any event that causes severe distress. That's what trauma is. But most complex trauma might have happened to us when we're either children, very young, or when we're helpless, right? Now you're an adult who can reason, right? Who can understand. But remember that when you're really living this trauma, it's happening to a child. It's not about the understanding you have now. As an adult, you can understand what happened. You can comprehend that. Your mind can make sense of it. But what happened to a child, a 5-year-old, for example, right? Whose brain wasn't fully developed to understand human complexities, right? So the understanding is different. So you don't look at yourself as you're an adult, look at yourself as that child that went through that, because it's not you, the adult, that went through that, it's the child that went through that. How would you talk to a child? If you see a child that's getting abused, how would you relate to that child, right? You'll be sympathetic. You'll be very upset for that child. You'll be very sad for that child. You know, the child is helpless. As an adult, that's how we feel when a child is getting abused. So that's how you need to relate to the experiences, especially when it's childhood experiences or childhood trauma. It's not the rational brain, it's more about emotions, it's more about the feeling, more relating to the child emotionally and sympathetically. So relate to them in that, in that way. You're talking to an innocent child that was helpless and fearful at the time that whatever trauma happened to them. And also, it's okay to cry. Actually, you should cry, right? The earliest emotions we knew and we were not taught was crying, right? It was instinctive. When you're born, you just cry, Sometimes doctors, midwives will actually hit the kid, obviously gently, so that they can cry, right? We weren't taught to cry. So crying is natural. Before we understood other emotions and we understood how to speak and communicate to our caregivers, we cried. When we wanted to eat, we cried. When we wanted someone to play with us, we cried. When we wanted to sleep, we cried, right? That's how we knew how to release anxiety, stress, and everything was to cry. So I feel like when we become adults, we kind of forget that crying is okay. It's okay to cry. I feel like for the longest time, crying to me was vulnerability. It was something that you don't do. Especially coming from like a African background, it's like crying is something that is seen as shameful, right? You're weak, you're pathetic, like why are you crying? Stop crying before I give you something to cry about, right? It's something that parents use. You're shamed for crying, but it's actually natural to cry. And that's one thing as well that therapy is. It's about you relating to that side of you, that emotional side of you, and actually crying if you need to cry. Trust me, it took me a long time to cry. I think it took me about 3 sessions actually, or 4 sessions. I had to like find the definitions of crying, like why we cry, to rationalize crying. But now I know it's like, it's okay to cry, I'm not embarrassed to cry anymore, but I can understand that we have been programmed for so long to not cry. Obviously cry in the comfort of your home or people that you feel confident in. But I just want to make sure that it's okay to cry. One time actually, a friend told me that, oh my god, like I was crying yesterday, and my reply was like, oh good, like it's good that you were crying. I think she probably thought I was going to give her a different response, but I'm like, yeah, it's good that you cry. I noticed that when you cry, you just feel so relaxed. Like when I cry, I just take a nap because I just feel so, I can finally sleep. Like it's something about crying that releases hormones, help you deal with stress. Actually, I can't remember the actual hormones that are released, but they're hormones similar to like painkillers. When you cry, it actually releases painkillers. So it's natural to cry. So maybe you can try crying later tonight if you've not cried. And also put it on the comment below. When was the last time you cried? When was the last time? Right, I can't even remember when last I cried actually. And one thing as well, once you start to cry, it's so difficult to stop. Now I know when I go to counseling or therapy, I just have my tissues there just in case I cry. It's okay. It's okay to cry every now and then. Therapists will not think you're pathetic. They've probably seen someone crying worse than that, right? This is their job. They've seen people cry. They've seen everything, right? Especially if they experience there's nothing. You can't tell them anything that they probably have not had before, right? Cry. They won't judge you. Another thing as well I would say is to develop a ritual before and after therapy session. So for example, for me, what I do before therapy is so my sessions are normally in the evening. So I would obviously have a shower. If I'm just coming from work, I would do a little bit of journaling, get my mind, prepared, be in a zen, light a candle, and have a glass of milk on the side just in case I get thirsty or something. So obviously you choose whatever helps you declutter your mind a little bit so that you're mentally prepared to go in your counseling session. And another thing as well is post-therapy. Obviously, like I said, what you talk about in therapy, especially if it's trauma, is going to be very, very intense. So you don't want to come out vulnerable. You don't want to come out disorientated, right? A lot of therapists, before the therapy finish, they will do breathing exercises or they will ask you if you're okay. They wouldn't rush you out. They'll make sure you're okay. You're centered, you're grounded before the session ends. So you could have a ritual that you do after therapy. You could literally take a few minutes to just, quiet yourself. And so something I do is I have dinner, or if it's too intense, I'll go to sleep or I'll read a book. So whatever works for you. The point I'm making is that see it has a pamper session for yourself, right? Before and after. Just treat yourself, do what will soothe you, right? Because again, like I said, most complex trauma that's based on childhood, it's basically a child reliving that trauma. So, and most children need comfort, right? So whatever that comfort is, if it's having snacks or giving yourself chocolate or ice cream at the end or doing takeout. I'm not saying develop unhealthy behaviors again. Do something to bring you back to your natural state. So another thing as well is when you start therapy, it will be good to balance things out. So it would be nice to start a hobby or volunteering. You could start a sport. Learning a sport is like another way to concentrate, right? Because when you go counseling, you're like concentrating intensely. So it balances out for you to do another hobby outside of that that's kind of a bit fun and a bit detached from everything. So you could do a sports, like I said, you can do an arty thing on the side. You could do painting, for example, and you could go gym as well. Gym is really, really good as well for mental clarity, for physical well-being, for emotional regulation. You know, it's just good to kind of distract yourself from other things from your sessions. Is having other passions outside. You're not trying to relive the trauma, you're trying to some extent relive it, but not for an extended period of time, because sometimes the mind doesn't know what's real and what's not real. So if you're thinking about certain behavior, your body thinks that it's happening. It's actually happening right now, right? So you don't want to be in that state for a long period of time. Reliving the trauma, it's not really very good. Volunteering is good as well. COVID has showed us that the good way to take a break from yourself and actually feel like there's a good thing in the world is actually helping others. So when you're helping others, you're kind of detaching a little bit from your immediate state, right, of pity. You're helping someone that's less fortunate, so you're bringing joy into someone else's life. So volunteering will be a good thing as well, to see that you're actually quite fortunate and you're helping others. You need to be patient with yourself, right? It will take some time, but it's definitely warfare at the end. You owe it to yourself as well to know what happened to you, right? The thing is, the mind is very, very complex, because sometimes the mind would hide certain things that has happened to us in our subconscious, just because at that time you were just so young and fragile and your mind wasn't developed to handle certain behaviors, that the event actually is buried in deep down in your subconscious, right? So when you go through therapy, it's like it's resurfacing that trauma back. So please be patient with yourself. It's going to take some time, and you owe it to yourself to know who you are, right? To know your experiences and to know what you want to be or who you want to be, and to not let your experiences hold you back, right? It's like once you know why you're behaving in a certain way, you can kind of sympathize with yourself a little bit more, and you can kind of give yourself grace. There's a reason behind this, but then you're helping yourself again to move past that, right? It's really powerful. Let's take a breather. That was a lot, right? So now let's summarize this. So therapy or counseling is useful to everyone. Don't knock it down, actually. Don't knock therapy or counseling down based on the stereotypes you've had or based on other people's experiences. Don't knock it down. Even if you knock it down, try it again. And try it again with the tips that I've just given you in these videos and see how that goes. It's not until you've tried everything and then knock it down, right? If you've tried everything, it doesn't work, then fair enough, right? But I'll say give it another go. Like if you're watching this video and you're thinking, I've done some therapy in the past, but it wasn't helpful, and you're contemplating whether to do it or not, I'll say give it another shot. Using what I've said, going into therapy prepared and choosing the right therapist. Therapy is needed now than ever. It's the first time ever humans have been so connected and interdependent, and yet they're so separated and alone, lonely than ever before. We live in a world full of noise and a multitude of beliefs. Make sure what you believe hold true to you. How would you know what you believe if you're being told what to feel, how to feel, what to think every day by Instagram, TikTok, YouTube? Do you know who you are and what you believe? By questioning everything, we break through the chains that hold us captive, and we are set free from the crawling caterpillar into the beautiful butterfly. COVID taught us that freedom is fleeting. You don't have to be a criminal to be in a cell, and you don't have to be in prison to be a prisoner. Are you physically free but mentally in bondage? Counseling and therapy could help you answer this question. But remember, the most powerful source is God. For who He set free is free indeed. Cast all of your burdens and worries and care onto the only one who would never leave you nor forsake you. So therapy is not a substitute for God or the substitute for a belief. Therapy is just having a caring friend that would help you deal with certain things that has happened in your past. I hope you have a blessed day, and remember to be a blessing. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I hope this video is helpful to someone. If it's not helpful to you, please share it to someone that you think might be helpful. And if you're contemplating doing therapy or counseling, please try it again for the sake of this video at least. One thing as well that I wanted to add is, if you're a parent and you have a child and you feel as though there's been some experiences that they would benefit from discussing with a therapist, I would say definitely recommend it to them. Just because when you're a child, therapy is free. I love free stuff, but when you're adult you have to pay. That's the one thing I wish I could change actually. When I was younger, I was offered therapy, but I didn't really do anything in my therapy sessions. I just went there, played games, and ate some rice crackers. I still remember those rice crackers, and just sat there. Literally, I did that every week, and I did not do anything with those sessions, and now I'm paying for it, right? So there is we pay for things when we're older. So yeah, if you like this video, please comment and like and subscribe. If you don't like it, still let me know why you don't like it and how I can make the videos better. But for now, thank you so much, and bye.